So let's move on to the next part, which is the composition part. So when I say composition, so it normally it's a pretty straightforward term to understand. So basically it means, hey, how are let's take a similar example that we have been looking at till now. How are my sales distributed across each region? That also gives me a composition. Okay, let's say how are my let's say you can also take a market share. Okay, for example, mobile market, okay, electronics market, and how are different top performing companies are have their market shares. So that also gives us a composition. So there are multiple examples that we can think of, and here also we have, let's quickly take a look at what different variants of composition we can we can see, and definitely then we'll go to Tableau. So first, on the left branch, we have something composition changing over time. So how my composition is changing with time, and obviously we have, when we are trying to compare across few time periods or many time periods, okay, in the time, so that is one dimension, and the other next dimension is what are we trying to emphasize on in the composition. Are we only trying to get the relative differences between the whatever the elements that we are trying to compare, or we also would we also need the absolute plus relative differences? Let's go to Tableau and create these charts and discuss these in depth. Okay, let's say I wanna here, and let's create the chart which says where both relative and absolute differences are important for a few time periods frame. Okay, so what I'll do is, so since we are comparing across time, so I'll pull in my time field order date, and I'll keep it at year level, so we have only few periods to compare to, and after that I'll bring in my sales. Let's see. So let me change this to bar, and standard size. Okay, let me do this then. Okay, so I have my sales across each year, and let's say I want to just see the split of the same sales across categories, okay, in each of the years. So I'll just take my category and put it in color, so I can see now, so in each year how each color represents a category and how the sales are there in each of those. So this kind of representation is kind of is conveying the absolute differences. So for example, absolute as well as relative. So in this particular, if I here I can see the length of the that particular mark, the color bar, I can easily compare it with the rest of the bars and see which one is higher and which one is low. And also I can compare this year's let's say furniture sales with any other furniture sales in the alternate years, so I can get a comparison there as well. So it's not only showing relative in that particular year, but it's also showing you to compare across each years for each of this category. Let's take an example where only relative comparison is important. We can create a similar chart, but it's just a slightly just a slight variant of the similar chart that would need to be created. What I'll do is, there is something called table calculation, and just take a percentage of total and adjust the table calculation to table down. So what it's doing here is, let me explain. Okay, so the top chart that we see here is the one that we saw earlier, where absolute and relative differences matter. And the bottom chart here we have is the one that which we created right now using the table calculation, where within each year it's splitting. Hey, I'll consider this entire bar as 100%, and I'll see how much percentage does each of these categories are having. So this 157k is considering is about like 32% of all the sales that we made in 2017. So if you notice one thing here, we are only getting relative differences. What I mean by that, so if you just notice these marks, okay, number one, here this 32% is reflecting of 157k sales, okay, in furniture. Now think of this one, which is 29% alone. So relatively, if you have to see 32%, 29% is less, but the sales value is far more, is 215k when compared to 57k, which is being represented as 32%. So here in the bottom chart, we are only showing the relative comparison across categories in each year, but we are missing out that, hey, actually this particular blue bar is far more higher than this 32% sales. So that sort of analysis is lost in the bottom chart. So if the client or the audience are only interested in getting the relative analysis, then we can go for the bottom chart. But if they are interested in both, then we should opt for the top one. So that's what here in the chart they are explaining for the first terms. So in over few periods, there are two terms. Only relative differences matter. You have to go with the stacked 100% bar chart, the one that we did at the bottom. And when both the matters, we have to just go with not the percentage, but just the stacked bar chart. Okay, so these are the two cases under few periods. Let's assume the same two cases when we have multiple periods. Okay, let's say I'll go back to the same chart. I'll just duplicate this one. Yeah. And now let's say instead of year, let's say I have more just to bring in more periods or time periods, I'll say month. Okay, now just look at it. It's so messy and it's not easy to interpret. So what they suggest is, instead of when you have multiple periods to consider, you have to just change from bar to area chart. So this kind of it's more appealing, and also it's easy to interpret and read. So on the top, again, the same conditions apply as in the previous charts, where it's showing both a relative and as well as absolute, whereas here in the bottom chart it's showing only relative changes with respect to the other categories in that particular time period. So these are the four variants that are available under over time composition. And now if we go to static compositions, it's not involved with time. We have few variants here as well. Let's see. Obviously we all know pie chart. So a simple when we have to show one quantity as a part of the whole quantity, like it's called share of a total, we just go with the pie chart. But always keep in mind that it's recommended to go with the pie chart only if you have to split the pie chart in less than 3 at max 4 quantities. So in most of the times you can even replace the use of pie chart with a bar chart, which is but if at all you have to use a pie chart, you can go for it as well. Now there's a other comparison in so let's say other composition. So it's called something called waterfall chart, and it's used whenever we want to take this sort of analysis. Either we want to show accumulation or subtraction of a total. Let's discuss what I mean by that. Just a minute. Normally, if you would see waterfall charts, let's actually stay there for a minute. These sort of charts here, they are typically used in, let me give a very broad example that I'm familiar with, is think of a profit and loss statement, P&L statement. So you normally have, hey, so these are all for a company, these are all at the year end. these are all my incomes that the company has generated, and these are all the expenses that the company has put in. So you can create a and you tally all those things, income and expense, and at the end you will be left with the what is my net income in this current year, right? So you can create a waterfall chart for the same. Let's say all the incomes are represented with a upward bar. Let's say I have a income of 100,000, and of this 100,000 I have put in, let's say some 20k for some operating expenses. So it has reduced, and some other 20k for some other expenses. And then later I have received some 40k additionally. So so those sort of statements, those sort of analysis where you have to look at accumulation, okay, or cumulative collection, how it's changing across time, not necessarily across time, but any categories as well, and look at the final result. You can get an overview picture of what has contributed to your up, what has contributed to your over, in this particular example, what has contributed to your income, what has contributed expense. You can take a look at them individually, and also you can get the what is my final current status towards the end of the year. So there are multiple examples otherwise other than profit and loss or income expenses where you can use waterfall chart, but let's not get there. But remember, wherever we have to use something like accumulation, cumulative, or results, when we have to show that, we can potentially look into this direction of to show them in the waterfall chart. Let's go back to Tableau and try and create one quickly. So let's say for the time being, let's just go with since we are using this data, let's just go with some before that, actually let me filter some data. Okay, so if I say the category sales, I just want to take some, okay, instead of sales, it's a profit. I want to include few categories where we have profit and loss, so that would be ideal for our waterfall chart. So let's take tables, let's take supplies, let's take labels, let's take this one as well, let's take cases, and we should also be fine. Just keep these alone and remove this. Okay, now let me drag in my year, or in fact my quarter for the date. Okay, and my profit, and change this to bar. Okay, maybe okay, it's up. Just a minute, guys. Okay, if you would see here, I'm just plotting what is my profit across each of the quarters. You can see the initial number here is negative, so obviously it means there's a loss in this particular quarter. There's a profit, loss, and profit. So this is similar. I'm trying to get the data in filtering certain categories and all, trying to get it in a shape where I can actually create a waterfall chart for the example that I've talked about. So obviously towards the end of the time we can get hey, this is all my profits that I've collected, these are all my losses, so I can at the end I can see what is my net profit or net loss towards the end. So this is a typical kind of scenario where I can use a waterfall chart and explain the same. So how to quickly create a waterfall chart? First thing is to get the cumulative differences. I know here this is my loss, but here this is my profit. So at this particular point, whatever my net profit or sales, and I need to calculate that. So this loss plus profit, so that will give me my net profit or loss. So likewise I need to calculate that across each and every point. So I'll make use of some table calculation which gives me the same, so which is running total, which basically sums up all as we move across the axis. And so yeah, so if you can see, this is my initial loss, and here from this loss I've just excluded whatever the portion that I got profit, and my loss is reduced. And likewise towards the end I can see my total. I actually have made some net loss of some minus $3,000. So I'll remove this now, since I've made cumulative one. This is not quite exactly as a waterfall chart, but let's now quickly create a simple calculation which says profit. Okay. And create it in size. Let me change this to Gantt bar. Okay, and also let me pull this perfect color. Okay. So if you can see here, let me actually bring in my profit as well for study purposes. Okay, so in the first quarter I have made so much amount of loss. Okay, and the same, so wherever you see red is a loss, so that's the period where we made loss, and wherever we see green or slightly gray is something like where we made profit. So let's say here I've made this much amount of loss. Okay, and if you would see, okay, actually just some coloring difference. Okay, I need to color this with the right field. Right, and here as well, I guess. Right, so red in profit, loss in red, and profit in blue. So and yeah, so this is my loss I've made in the first quarter, and in the second quarter I've made some gains, some profit. So obviously my profit has reduced. I've ended here and it's went up to my this is my, as of now, the current loss. And in the third quarter also I made some more profit, so my net profit has increased to somewhere around like 500k, and again I've made some more profit. Again this 500k has increased from 500k to some 1200k. In the next quarter I've made some loss, and likewise it continues, and towards the end I've made this some overall, so I've made this much amount of total loss of $3,000 or something. So this is how a typical waterfall chart we can create. So the calculation and all, it's something that we can keep it for other session there. So yeah. So that's on the waterfall chart, and a few other other metrics, like let's say if we are trying to compare multiple subcomponents across not across time but just statically, we can refer to the similar chart which we have created for here. So where basically the top chart here, it's a same stacked bar chart where we are trying to compare sales across a certain category on x-axis. Here it's year, but need not necessarily be year here, and we are trying to just see how different categories stack up in that particular category. And the third and actually the fourth and the final one is the tree map. Okay, It's a pretty famous one as well, where we are trying to kind of get an accumulation kind effect which we got in waterfall chart, and also as a comparison of total, both basically absolute sense as well. So let's just create one and discuss there. So let's select few fields, category, subcategory, and I want our sales. Let me just quickly go to show me and create a tree map. So if you can see here, when I hover on a tree map, it shows one or more dimensions at the bottom, or to one or more measures. So I have selected 2 dimensions and 1 measure, so it's allowing me to create this chart. And I'll create so yeah, so let me just color it accordingly and get back. Put my category in colors. Okay, so now each of the color that we see here is representing a certain category, and each of the squares that we see, rectangles that we see within that category, represents a certain subcategory within that category. So I can pull in my sales as well to label, and I can see, okay, so in my technology category, the phones subcategory is having some $330,000, and can compare it with across some other subcategories. I can also get an overview of how my phones sales are, phones subcategory sales are in comparison with my overall sales. So I can clearly see that phones is having a significant contribution, whereas my other subcategories like fasteners or envelopes, they are not so much when compared to my overall sales. I can also get within category what are my sales, and also other analysis that we can get is how are my sales for each of the categories, so each of the color regions in comparison with the total. So there are lots of analysis that are possible, both relative and absolute. So whenever we need, it's also pretty popular approach when we are trying to show composition across categories, both relative and absolute. Okay, I think we have covered all the chart types that we have here. So comparison, distribution, relationship, and composition. So yeah, again, just to a reminder towards the end, it's just a thought starter. So normally whenever you want to create some visualization, it will definitely give you a good, it's definitely a good place to start, but not necessarily it need not be the final step, or the there is no necessary that you have to definitely go for one of the chart types that you see here. So it definitely depends upon the situation and the audience that you're trying to cater. You have to obviously customize it a little, and if needed, you have to combine a couple of charts and get the result out of it. It's just a starter for you, just to give you the direction, but yeah, you have to take it from there and create your own visualization when needed. Okay, if you have any questions, yeah, you can let me know. Otherwise, we can call it a day. Okay.